The year is 2021. As China nears its inevitable defeat, a new chapter in this great conflict begins. Learning of top-secret weapons that could threaten the global balance of power, US forces push deep into Russian territory. But the enemy is far from willing to concede. In a desperate attempt to spread NATO thin, the Russian Federation launches a full-scale invasion of Europe. And while the US struggles to mobilize its military on this new front, Eastern Europe falls completely under Russian control. Belarus declared itself willing to surrender, while most others are completely obliterated. Warsaw is taken in less than 2 months. Only as major German cities stand on the brink of capture can the US finally make its move and support its allies. The remainders of the Polish and German militaries fight alongside the Americans as they are all that stands in their way of complete Russian dominance of the continent.
Hi everyone, Criskit here, and welcome to episode 1 of Battlefield Concepts. I hope you guys enjoyed that intro. It was just a little something to set the scene for my idea on 2021's new Battlefield installment. Now, funnily enough, the war of 2020, as it's referred to in BF4, continues into 2021 in this hypothetical scenario, making the time frame of the game align with real life almost perfectly, since BF games traditionally come out near October or November. The gameplay itself would be in line with modern-day shooters, perhaps with a few more sci-fi-like elements that we had in BF4, but not many. I would prefer to see modern-day equipment like Leopard 2 and T-14 Armata tanks, for example. Seeing those come to life in the new Frostbite engine would be quite the experience. The main idea with multiplayer is Bundeswehr, American, Polish, and other NATO factions fighting Russia with modern equipment in all kinds of areas. Now, let's start off with my personal launch map lineup. As you may be able to tell, there is a huge focus on urban maps here, but this doesn't mean that there can't be more open spaces for tank and airplane combat within them. During EA Play, DICE teased new tech for the upcoming BF game, and one of these things included increased player counts. Perhaps we could see conquest maps with up to 128 players, twice that of previous games, and realistic one-to-one scale buildings and streets to compensate for that, such as downtown Berlin, where players can fight in open spaces and buildings, but still have the ability to hide from higher amounts of vehicles due to the increased player count. Obviously there would have to be a lot more cover in these open areas, but still the one-to-one scale would allow for a lot more immersive maps. Another subject I want to touch on is the gunplay. This is easily one of the most important elements of a good Battlefield game, and I think that BF5 almost nailed it. The weapons felt snappy, recoil was manageable, and your shots would always go where your sights were. There are a few points of contention in the community, however, namely the MMGs. I think we should return to BF1 system, allowing the players to aim down sights with even the largest of LMGs, with the simple trade-off of damage in close quarters. This would allow us more freedom with our playstyle and limit bipod camping. One point I also want to make is the sniping. The sniping in BF5 is personally my favorite out of the series. Muzzle velocity, ADS time and damage all felt very reasonable, and the class still required skill to make the most use of. Another thing mentioned a lot among the community, especially later in BF5's lifecycle, are game modes. I, and many others, think that DICE bit off way more than they could chew with BF5's lineup of modes and features. Combined Arms was clearly half-baked, and not even close to what we were promised, along with the almost weekly new game modes that only stayed temporarily, like Grind and Outpost. Then there was the campaign, which we know takes up an obscene amount of dev time every time there's a new title releasing. All this work spread DICE too thin to perfect the core modes, so I think that the lineup for BF 2021 has to be trimmed down significantly. I suggest only 5 modes at launch: Conquest, Operations, Rush, Breakthrough, and TDM. I know some wouldn't agree with this, but it will give some developmental breathing room and make the overall experience much better in the long run. Operations should definitely be done exactly how they were in BF1. Simple breakthrough on 2 maps, connected by short cutscenes, nothing more, nothing less. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Of course, there could always be more modes later on, like Grind or Frontlines, as they were fan favorites, but it should be kept to a minimum as to avoid splitting up too much of the community. As for Battle Royale, I doubt Battlefield needs another one of those. Most of the community is over it. If a separate EA studio wants to make a Frostbite BR game, they can go ahead. But DICE can't afford eating up valuable time with a third massive developmental task besides the multiplayer and campaign. In regard to exactly what happens with the campaign, I think the next title will probably have one. And if so, they should make it the best effort they can. I could definitely see a War Stories campaign during a modern-day invasion of Europe being very interesting and memorable. In terms of quality of life changes, I mentioned a few in my last video, those being a more robust assignment system, larger squads with a focus on voice chat and teamplay to make coordinating bigger teams easier, and a more authentic and believable customizations lineup. If you want to hear a little bit more about those, feel free to check out my last video. On top of all these things, returning to BF4's style of weapon mods would be quite the welcome addition, with attachments changing the way a gun functions instead of just adding perks to a weapon in a separate menu. It doesn't have to be as complex as Modern Warfare's Gunsmith, for example, but simple things like foregrips, lasers, and different sight options are a nice thing to have. Changing the way a gun functions is one way to keep players interested as they experiment with new combinations to find what works best for them. In my opinion, squad call-ins were a good addition in BF5, and I think they should stay. They reward team play and make for some fun moments during a match. The artillery strike should definitely be nerfed. The V1 could be replaced by a Moab or bunker buster, and smoke barrages could be more useful in the larger maps. Of course, there could be completely new call-ins, like an anti-ship missile or a tank airdrop. The last thing worth mentioning is post-launch support. I personally think, as much as it pains people to hear it, the Battle Pass is a good route to go along. A $10 pass that refunds itself upon completion, and allowing you to unlock different cosmetics and other perks. Add additional cosmetic purchases, and DICE have a pretty good source of income. No loot boxes, no shortcut kits, and no paid DLC. New maps and weapons should be free for all players, keeping the community together as much as possible. Of course, this Battlefield game is only my idea, and I'm sure you could probably disagree with me on at least one of these points, but at the end of the day, a modern setting, larger teams with larger squads, more team play options, and a good gunplay system, all while sticking to core modes and good, free post-launch support, sounds pretty good to me. This next game has absolutely massive potential, and I'm looking forward to seeing what it's all about. I hope you all are too, and I hope some of these things actually make it into the game one way or another. If you like the video, please make sure you leave a like and consider subscribing, as I have much more videos on the way. Have a good one, everybody.